Good morning, everybody. So today is gonna be a story about another big synchronicity that happened when I was in Australia. This synchronicity is probably the one that started my discovery, my trying to understand what life is about, and probably to take me to this new path that it's we can call it spirituality, we can call it religion, or simply trying to figure out what how life is, or what is the meaning of life, or our life purpose, or question that is very hard to have an answer, and I don't really know if it's any in this planet, in this lifetime, as a human being I ever had. But I would say that this big synchronicity, it's what anyway put me into course to try to understand if there is more than what we see and perceive. That was in Sydney, and it was my first few months in Australia when this guy arrived with a big electric piano in the hostel. His name was Bradley, and he claimed to be an artist playing in bars. So he was half Aboriginal and half Australian, half Aboriginal and half Maori from New Zealand. And he told us that he missed the plane to be back to New Zealand, so he had to stay a few more days. Those few more days turns out to be months. He was like a really interesting character. He would talk non-stop, really friendly and very talkative, but when he would get drunk, it would become really annoying, aggressive, slowly became very violent, and did have some arguments, sort of fight sometime. He was really friendly and really nice toward me, and never really understood why. He every time, even when he was getting drunk and aggressive, he would still be very, very kind to me. I would understand it only later on. So one night, I came back from work. At the time, I was working as a waiter in a restaurant in around Darling Harbour, and there was a police car outside the hostel. And when I ran inside, worried that maybe someone came, robber. I mean, the area where the hostel was located in a very dodgy area, with a lot of drug dealers, prostitute. So I thought maybe someone broke inside and stole everything. So I worried. I got inside and asked what happened. And apparently Bradley, very drunk, got into an argument with a French guy. And well, what can I remember? They told me he took a knife. He wanted to, he threatened the guy to stab him or something, and then he ran away. So I thought that's it. In the morning, I was at the ground floor in the toilet to shampoo, and it was summer, so there was a little window that gave into the street, and it was open. When all of a sudden a head just popped up, and it was Bradley, looking at me and shouting that he would take a revenge, he would kill everyone, but that had to be don't have to be worried because he knew that I was the only good person. He always really freaked me out. I put my pants on and run inside the hostel telling people about Bradley being around. We didn't we haven't seen him for quite a few months. It was the gay pride, and with friends we went to for the parade. When I think I didn't understand why it did not. It never really bothered me, and probably because he did like me. So he was in a gay bar with some other guys. I happened to see him inside, and we hide ourselves, change direction, and run away. Surprised to see Bradley in that bar when we knew that he told us he would go back to New Zealand in a few days. So that's it. I spent more months in Sydney. I traveled with two friends from Sydney to Byron Bay, and in Byron Bay I took a bus to Bundaberg, where, as I told you, then I would meet Kaori. So me and Kaori, after almost a year, we moved to Perth. So we did live in Perth for almost 2 years, and in Perth we lived in a hostel, and Kaori moved back to Japan for holiday while I was looking for a flat. So I stayed in the hostel a bit more. So one day, watching football with a couple of Scottish friends, I heard a voice coming from the main entry, and when I turned back, looking at who it was, because it was quite a loud voice. It was Bradley. You can imagine my surprise. It passed more than a year and a half since when I met Bradley in that hostel in Sydney. Sydney and Perth are 3 hours flight. So I met this guy in Sydney, and then more than a year and a half later I met him in Perth. Sydney is in the east coast, Perth in the west coast, 3 hours flight. And Perth is at 2 million people. How many hostel? Many. He was in the holy hostel where I was. So obviously, for my big surprise, and a bit frightened, a bit shocked. That was at the beginning. Like now, if it would happen now, I wouldn't find anything strange. But at the time, I felt, what's going on? It's like, what the hell this guy is doing here? And he came out with this story that he came to visit the sister. The husband did not like him, so he needed a place to stay. It turns out that he was in a gay bar, and an Australian guy that was in benefit and living in the hostel basically hooked him up inside the gay bar and took him to live with him in the hostel. What was weird at the time is that he looked at me like nothing weird. There was nothing weird, to meet someone in Sydney. 1 year and a half later, met him again another hostel. So it was like, for him, it was like there was nothing weird on this, about this, nothing. So I move on with my life. Obviously, try to find a flat for before Carrie would be back. Bradley slowly restart to do the same shit that I was doing in Sydney. But it wasn't over. It wasn't over because 2 weeks later, that Bradley moved inside the hostel. I went to work. I was working a cafe in a suburb called Mount Lawley, and the cafe thing was, the name was Mia Cafe. He's a really nice manager, a really nice, great guy. So I arrived, and the guy, Alex, we have a new cook. Would like to introduce you to him. And when I went to the kitchen, I'm not kidding. I almost fainted. The new cook was Bradley. The new cook was Bradley. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe. This guy that I met in Sydney, that he probably fancied me, that ran away after treating a French guy with a knife, ended up moving in the same hostel where I was in Perth. 1 year and a half later, 3 hours flight from Sydney, all the city where you could go, it was in Perth, in my same hostel. And 2 weeks later, he had a job in my cafe. With all the cafes that you have in Perth, he got a job in the only cafe where I was working. Obviously, I could not tell the story to people who would not probably believe me at the time. I mean, at the time I feared they would not believe me, and I wouldn't. I didn't tell it. I didn't tell it to anyone. So I asked Bradley, how the hell? I thought you play piano, and he came out with this story. Well, it's like when I can't play piano and I need money, I learn to cook so I can make some extra money. But what literally freaked me out at the time is that even when we met inside the cafe, for him it was like the most normal thing. Like, there's nothing weird. You meet someone in Sydney, 1 year and a half later you met him in Perth, that is 3 hours away from Sydney. 2 weeks later, you end up working in the same cafe with this person, and for him was okay. Like, there is nothing weird in that. So obviously, for me, that was, I need to understand more. So it took me a while before I actually started to really try to figure out what, all of this might be, what we call reality. But that was literally what put me into course, what obviously triggered this need to understand, because obviously I could not see life in the same way, you know, before that friend Alessandro, that I met in Madrid, then 1 year later in Lisbon, and then 1 year later, you know, he told me that he worked for this uncle, and that I didn't know to have in Australia. And then, then Bradley, I was like, I need to understand, and obviously I'm still trying to understand, because I did experience many things. Experience what they call it, spiritual experiences, and I still don't have answer. I would say I did have a glimpse of like what life could be, like there is a curtain, you open it a bit, you can see, but you can, and then it closes, you can see probably. So that's this at the stage I am, and probably most of us. But yeah, this one was really a big one, really a big one, that then led to many others that I will tell you next time. Have a good day for today, and I will see you next time. Bye.